What's going on, guys? Isaiah here with Goo Gaming. Today I got Logan here with me today, and we're going to be doing a tier list over the new June 5th TCG format. A lot of changes happen on this next ban list, so we're going to jump right into it and tell you what we think the best decks going into the new format are going to be. Let's go. Alright, guys, so we're going to start off this ban list with a deck that I honestly don't think it's real, but a lot of people like it. Shout out Lou. It's Dark Worlds. How do you feel about Dark Worlds, Lou? Or Logan?
I think it was very, very bad last format, and I don't think it's going to change very much. I think people are still going to play Droll, at least in the side deck, especially at the beginning. Shifter being super popular, I just think it's a rogue.
Yeah, I think with all the hate for you're talking about Droll, Shifter, Kashtira is still in the format, all that. I think the deck's just not real. I mean, it does a lot of cool things, and sure, you could probably top a regional with it, but I think if you're going into a 13 round event, you're going to be struggling.
Plus, who wants to do that for like 13 rounds, man?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so the next on our list, we have the Albaz deck, branded deck, Despia deck, whatever you want to call it. This deck just keeps getting fire support. They did lose Expulsion, which doesn't do a whole lot. It makes the Gimmick Puppet line a little bit more vulnerable because now it can be hit by more things because people were before just banishing the Gimmick Puppet, but now you're going to get hit by Bell, you're going to get hit by DD Crow, all that stuff a lot more often. But I still think the deck is pretty solid. If it's not tier 1, it's definitely tier 2, but I'm pretty sure there's just a tier 1 deck. This deck is, other than Ash being an FTK most of the time, it's really good.
Yeah, I think it's a tier 1 deck. I think the expulsion hit is actually hurts a lot more than people think because now it's very hard to gimmick puppet someone without resolving Branded Fusion. Um, and like if Branded Fusion's already resolving, man, do you really need to add the brick to your deck just to gimmick puppet them? You're probably winning anyway.
Yeah.
So, but I do think the deck's strong, but I think some people think it's probably going to be like the best deck. It could be, um, but I think the deck has a lot of problems. But I do think the deck is still a tier 1 deck.
My problem with a deck like this being the quote best deck is there's so many cards that are really good against it, like Bell, the Bestial package, obviously all that stuff. So if it does become the best deck, then people just start main decking all the hate for it on top of already main decking Ash. So it just makes it even harder for you to go through a whole tournament and not have to just pass your turn. Like I played 2 Brandon players at the YCS and I just ashed them and they just passed and I just killed them. So
I mean, yeah, and also like sometimes it's not even just Ash Blossom, right? Like sometimes like your hand's really weak, and if your Aliber gets impermed, you just pass,
yep.
and that happens sometimes.
Next on the list is a goof favorite. We have the Draco Slayers. How do you feel about Draco Slayers?
Um, I think the deck dies to Droll and Lockbird. I think that a lot of people think that the super heavy samurai cards are really good in the deck, which they probably are decent. But it's you're not really fixing the problem of the deck, so I think it's just rogue.
I definitely think the deck gets a little better now that they're not locking all 5 of your zones, but they can still lock, one. So they lock your one pendulum zone. It just kind of hurts the deck a lot too.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I definitely think it's a road deck. Maybe we'll put some more thought into the deck and build us another list for a video. All right, now we got Dragon Link. I've seen a lot more people starting to play Dragon Link. I think Dragon Link still has the same issues it had. The thing Dragon Link stays as relevant as it does is because all the Dragon cards are just so good on their by themselves.
Yeah, I also think that the bestial cards get a lot better, right? Because I think a lot more people are going to be playing Brandon, and a lot more people are going to be playing Labyrinth.
Yep.
And I think the bestial cards are good against both of those decks. And with Kashtira hopefully falling out of favor, I think this deck gets a lot better, but I don't think it's tier 1. I think it's a good tier 2 deck.
Yeah, especially if there's a good player behind it. All right, the Devon special. We got Drytron here. How you feel about Drytron?
I think Bestials just slaughter this deck. I think, you know, I think it's probably a little bit better than these other 2 in Rogue, though. It's probably like a tier 3 deck, probably, or at the top of Rogue, like right borderline. But like I said, with Despia being popular, people are gonna be playing Bestials. With Dragon Link being popular, they main deck the cards. I don't really foresee this deck being like a powerhouse like we've seen it in the past.
Yeah, I think I don't even know if bringing Eva back would make it a tier 1 deck again, but the deck is cool. Like Devin was cooking with it at the YCS, but the deck just loses to so much that's already in the meta. And then here we got the Fred special. We got Exosister. I don't think the deck's
Unfor-
real.
yeah, I mean the deck is extremely good when it gets to play. The only problem is it doesn't get to play all the time. Like when you draw Martha, the deck is great. When you don't see a way to get to Martha, the deck is like feels like a bulk deck sometimes.
Yeah, that's why I like. I don't even know if it's a road deck, bro. Like the deck does cool things, like you said, when it gets to play. But like we're not even in that heavy graveyard format right now, so it doesn't even do a whole lot.
Right. I think it's a rogue deck, and I think it's a little bit better than Dark World and the Draco Slayer deck.
Oh.
Um, but they're all pretty rough.
Floowandereeze without the barrier statue is still surprisingly really strong. I don't think it's tier 1, but I would probably say it's a tier 2 deck. There was one that topped the YCS, right?
Um, yeah. I mean, getting to play Shifter is really cool. I don't think this deck's personally that good, but it does have a really good matchup against like Labyrinth and stuff. If you don't get like floodgated, right?
Yep.
Because like your punishment stuff like that, like they're just gonna outgrind you. So yeah, I think like bottom of tier 2, top of tier 3 is like where I would put Floowandereeze. Um, but I definitely like just because it's a tier 3 or whatever doesn't mean it can't top, right? Like
Yeah, you have a
you know,
perfect day.
you have
You draw your
Shifter.
birds and your shifter. You're probably going to win some games.
I mean, you have Shifter, you have Featherstorm. These are really powerful cards.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, now we got Gold Pride, which is a deck a lot of people are starting to love. I still am not big into it, and we know Tavion's been playing the crap out of it. What do you think about the deck?
I think the deck struggles against Despia really hard.
Yep.
I think one of its best matchups got hit really hard, like being Cash and Super Heavy, because the deck is really good at removing bodies. But if your deck doesn't care if you lose bodies, then like the deck is way way worse. I think it's a solid tier 2 deck, probably about the same level as Dragon Link. But I don't think it's a tier 1 deck, to be honest.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I did play Tavion a couple times, and he seemed like he was doing a lot. But I can see where you're saying with the two best matchups for it are leaving, then it's probably going to be a little harder to do away with the deck.
All right, up next we have a fan favorite. Just kidding. Most people are so tired of this deck and really want it to die, but Konami for some reason thought it should stay playable, which is Kashtira. It's obviously still going to be tier 1. I don't think anyone thinks otherwise. But I don't actually think it's the best deck in the format. I don't think it's going to be as good as people thinks it is. Just because I think losing on a Rise Heart does a lot, and I'm not a big fan. I know people, if they watch this, they'll probably be like, "What do you know about the Raid Raptor combo?" Yes, I know about the Raid Raptor combo. The reason I don't like that combo is because it uses so many cards in your extra deck, and you lose to a Talent Zeus.
Yep.
And I think Talents become so much better against this deck because there's no way to play around it now. And I think that like just going second cards in general become a lot better against this deck just because of the inability to like lock out your bonus zones.
Yeah, I think Kashtira, until they lose like Birth, I think the deck's still going to be really strong. Obviously, if they hit a lot of the cards, it'll be a lot weaker. But the one Arise Heart, I don't think is a major issue, or like it's an issue, but it's not so much of an issue that's going to take it out of the game. I think it goes from this massive make a big board and zone lock you to like more of a play slower deck, like kind of like Zodiac was. And you just sit on your Rise Heart and some other stuff. I do agree with you that the Raid Raptor combo I don't like it. Like you were talking about, if you use Pot and then you do the Raid Raptor combo, you're ending with 3 cards in your extra deck. It's like, what are you going to do on your next turn?
Yeah, if they break your board, your entire game plan, what is it? Just Fenrir Unicorn attack?
Yeah.
Like that can't even out on a lovely like a Lady Labyrinth, you know?
Speaking of Lady Labyrinth, we got Labyrinth.
I think this is probably the best the deck's ever been.
Yep, I agree.
If this deck is going to be the tier 1 deck, I don't think it's going to be the best deck of the format. I think trap decks it struggles really hard with being the best deck, but I think that this deck has an actual like chance of being like a top tier, like top 3, top 4 deck of the format.
My biggest problem with the deck, and it is the deck I've been playing for a little bit, is with the 2 variants you can run, the trap deck and the IKEA deck. The Trap deck struggles the most with the mirror match against the IKEA deck. But the trap deck does so well against all the other meta decks. And it's just weird because I feel like going into a tournament playing this deck and playing, let's say, 4 or 5, maybe 6 mirror matches is going to be a nightmare. And then on top of that, with this being the best deck, I think the reason it was doing so well this past format is because nobody was playing like evenly matched and stuff. So people knowing that this is probably top 3, 4 decks in the meta, they're going to start siding heavier for it, and I think it's going to be a lot harder to do well with the deck.
I could definitely see that. But like even through the hate, I think this deck is strong enough to like still be a high contender in the meta.
Yeah, I definitely think it's one of, I would say, top 3 best decks in the format easily.
The next is Manadome. I like this deck a lot. I think the amount of stuff you can do with just Visa Starfrost is insane. This deck can play the Yang Zing monsters and use Dinglong and abuse Dinglong a lot because the Manadome Field Spell allows you to bring back tuners that are destroyed by card effects. And the funny thing is, the Yang Zing counter trap actually destroys Dinglong, so you can bring back Dinglong and search follow up and then like synchro on your opponent's turn. I think this deck is like at the top of tier 2. I think if people figure it out, I think it's a sleeper deck of the format. It could be a tier 1 deck. It's just people have to figure out like the right build for it.
Yeah, I also think that the deck's really strong. I played it against at locals yesterday, and the guy was showing me like after the game like the way his combos in and everything, and we talked a lot about how I don't remember what card he said, but there was one card in the deck that you have to play that's really bad, and he was talking about how when the new support comes out, the deck gets a lot stronger. So maybe when that comes out, maybe it definitely climbs up. But ending
yeah, for sure.
He was ending on Appaloosa, Chaos Angel, Baron, and something else. I forgot what the other synchro was, but it was really cool. And then we got Marincess. I don't know a whole lot about Marincess. I know the combo with the big Link 4 Water Dragon thing, I forgot its name, is really powerful. But I haven't really seen this deck do a whole lot since like Elijah topped Nats with it, I think is what it was.
Yeah, I mean it topped the 250th. It topped Vegas, but I think this format's a little bit different. I think this deck gets its power from hand traps being good, and I don't think hand traps are going to be that great against 2 of the top decks. So honestly, I think this deck is probably just rogue, man. Like this deck is only as good as the hand traps that it can play, and if the going second cards it can play, and if the going second cards aren't strong, then this deck gets a lot weaker.
Now, Mathmech did lose a circular. I don't know if it hurts the deck a whole lot. I know the deck, it definitely loses consistency, but they still have 6 circulars. So like that's really the only thing they lost. So you're still like doing your full combos most of the time. But again, this is a deck that I feel like if you can't do your full combo, then you're ending on like Heat Soul Pass. I don't even know if that's enough. So maybe hitting circular to 1 did put it like really in check.
Yeah, I've actually play tested a decent amount against this deck post Banlist, and it is strong, but it is a lot weaker to hand traps, man. Like the way that Mathmech could play through so many hand traps was opening circular, and if you do not open circular, like you literally get like destroyed by Droll and Lockbird because they're always going to draw you, because you have to search your circular, right?
Yeah.
Ash Blossom on Sonnet Mining in Small World a lot of the time hurts a lot, and Imperm and Valor is really strong because like you just stop the rank 4 if they need to go that route, and it hurts a lot. This deck definitely gets weaker, but I think the deck is still really good. Yeah, I think it's a solid tier 2 pick. I think the deck can top events still. I think it's pretty strong. It's just
fragile.
Yeah, it's just more fragile, man.
Now let's talk about Purrely. Purrely got. I haven't played Purrely. I'm not really sure how bad it got hit with the spell. But I've heard a lot of people say this deck just got slaughtered just with the 1 spell going.
Well, okay, so I've done very little play testing with it post Banlist. I've played like 2 or 3 matches, and I will say the deck still felt pretty strong. Believe it or not, I think if you choose to go second, I think that's a viable option because you just do the happiness line and you end on a Nor, or you like Zeus them and then make plays.
Yeah,
I think that's that's respectable. I think going first and playing multiple Yeep and Field Spell because targeting is pretty big in this format with Labyrinth, with a lot of like people playing Effect Veiler and stuff because Gamma got banned or not banned but got hit to 1.
Yeah. Rest in
I
peace.
think the deck's pretty strong still, but I think it's probably about the same power level as like the Mathmech deck. And I think Mathmech is probably better than Dragon Leak and Gold Pride though.
Now with Wild Survivors coming out, we got new Dino cards, right? And we got pretty Dino cards.
That's true. You get to bling out your Dino deck. You get some cool plays,
You get all of
but
that
unfortunately,
just to stay at a
Miss.
rogue deck.
I think it's a little bit better than Rogue.
You think so?
I think it's. I do. I think it's like a tier 3 deck. So the new spell is absurd. Like it's really really good. If Miscellaneous was at 3, we would be talking tier 2. I don't think tier 1, but like in contention of like being a pretty decent deck.
Bro, they can't put Miscellaneous at 3. They just can't.
But I think that the deck can make some pretty respectable boards. I think the deck can go second and kill. The only problem with the deck is consistency. And if people can make it consistent, I think it probably could top an event.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. I mean, Tyranno's one of the best boss monsters ever printed, especially for a main deck. And it's like the card's just so good. All right, Logan, this is your baby. Tell me what you feel about Striker.
Okay. So I think Striker is very good. Like, I don't think Striker is tier 1.
No.
I think I don't think it's the top of tier 2, but I think it's probably about the same level as Mathmech. I think Striker. It also depends on how the format goes. I think if there's a big combo deck, like if someone figures out like a really powerful combo deck, Striker gets a lot worse. But if the format continues how it's looking like it's going into the direction of like a mid-range format, if it continues in that direction, I think Striker is very strong. So I think Striker all depends on like how the format evolves. If it goes into like a more combo format and people figure out things, the deck gets significantly worse. But if people like continue to just arise hard pass, man, I think Striker is really well positioned.
Yeah, I think with the power level of Striker compared to the power level of decks now, that they could have full power Striker, which they almost have now, and the decks just it'll always see play, but I don't think it'll ever be the number 1 best deck again. But like you were saying, like depending on the format, if the format stays mid range, it'll be really strong. If it becomes heavy combo, then it'll be really weak. And I think going forward, it'll probably get 3 engage next list, and it'll probably stay at full power, and then it'll just come in and out of metas.
I can definitely see it.
All right, now we got the Zeph and the Jabin special with Rika. I love this deck. I think this deck is very powerful. I think this deck doesn't do as well at events because a lot of people don't play it, and people are too lazy to take the time to learn this deck, including myself. But as you see, like people in Europe, we were talking about this yesterday, there's a group of like 3 or 4 people that top every event they play in playing Rika because they put so much time and effort into this deck that they've learned it. And a lot of people, they're playing against this deck and they don't know how to play against this deck, so they just get destroyed by the tributing for cost and all that. And I like this deck a lot. I'm not going to say it's tier 1, but I definitely think it's a good meta contender.
I think it's tier 1.
Really?
That's a hot take. Yeah. I think the deck's effects line up really well, especially in a slow since the format's slowing down a little bit. It's the only true combo deck. So people are like, if people are cutting hand traps, man, this deck could take advantage of that. I think the deck probably struggles a little bit with Labyrinth, but I think the other 2 the deck has a decent matchup against. Brandon doesn't really have any way to remove spells and traps. Kashtira only has 1 Arise Heart. You can out that easy. And even some of the other tier 2 decks, if you out their bodies, there's nothing they could do. I think the deck's strong, man. I really do. I don't think it's like the top of tier 1, but I definitely think it's a tier 1 deck. It's just like you have to learn how to play this deck, and it's very hard to play.
Fountain to 2. That kind of hurts, right? Not really. But I think what's going to hurt the Runick decks, the only Runick deck I thought was really good was the Naturia deck and Sacred Tree to 1. How do you feel about Runick decks right
now? So I'm kind of okay. So I kind of have like a weird feeling about Runic decks. I'm not a big fan of the Spright Runic deck. I think Spright gets a lot of power out of the Mosquito and the Zeus, and Runic doesn't allow you to do that. So like you kind of can't make those cards. So that's the reason I'm not a big fan of that engine with Spright. Now there's also the Fur Hire version and then the Plunder Patrol version. I think the decks are pretty strong, but I think a lot of people are going to be siding spell trap removal, and I think that hurts these decks a lot.
Yeah, I agree. Especially if people start playing Cosmic Cyclone. That's gonna be
Yeah, I
great.
think it's at the top of tier 2, borderline tier 1. It just depends on what version you play, of course. Um, yeah, I think the decks are strong. It's just I'm not sure if they're good enough.
Now, long live Scarecrow. We're talking about Super Baby Samurais now. Shout out Noah and Fox for topping the YCS with this deck. If you haven't seen their deck profiles as well as our cash toppers, we had 5 people top the YCS. The videos are in our most recent post. Make sure you check them out. But with Scarecrow getting hit, I think the deck becomes a lot more fragile, the same way we're talking about with Mathmech earlier. But I still think this deck is very strong.
Um, okay, so I have kind of a different take. Um, I think the deck as an engine, flashing it into things is pretty strong.
Same.
If your deck, I don't think you should just splash into random decks, because a lot of people are splashing it and they're just thinking, oh, it just gives me a free Baron. But like you have to open bike to make Baron,
Yep.
and you have to add 2 bricks to your deck, which makes no sense. But if your deck can support, like if you want to support like a Pendulum Summon, and like you're already synchroing, so you're already making like Baron, you're already doing these things. I think a level 4, like a level, being able to make a level 8 synchro is really strong. So I think as an engine, it's probably somewhere in tier 2, but as a deck itself, man, I'm not a big fan. Now probably somewhere in tier 2 is probably where I would put it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think, like you were saying, the engine. I think the engine's really strong. I think you could also play the engine in something that you could play like rank 4s with and stuff. Maybe even like Tellarknights. You could probably, like, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but you could probably play it with Tellarknights like Wakashi, make a rank 4, and just go straight into the new Tellarknight XYZ because he's generic. But I don't know. Like you said, I think the Scarecrow hit just really hurt the deck as a pure deck.
Yeah. Also, another thing, if you're wanting to play the engine, this is another thing I forgot to mention, is that the speller, like the Runic decks, the Labyrinth deck, even Sky Striker, those decks are going to be pretty popular. And you lose the ability to play like evenly matched and lightning storms a lot of the time in those decks, because like you can't activate spells and traps before you use the super heavy samurai cards, right? So
Yep.
like those are 2 very, very powerful spell or trap removal cards that you just don't have access to. And when I'm going to say trap decks, which I know 2 of them play spells, but back row decks are that popular, it's kind of hard for me to think that the engine's worth it.
Let's talk about Scareclaw. I haven't really looked into Scareclaw a whole lot. I have played against it before, and the deck seems like it does a lot, and it's really cool, but I don't really know a whole lot to put my take on it.
So the Scareclaw cards are really, really strong, but they don't really have like a payoff, man. That's their problem. They don't have a payoff. Like they can summon a ton of bodies, they can do a bunch of stuff, but for some reason you always just see it end on the link 3 and pass. Um, but I do think the deck's strong. Maybe it's like a Kashtira hybrid now. I don't know. I haven't made the deck. I'm gonna put it into Rogue, but like Rogue as in like it could be meta, right? And like I think it's a lot better than Dark World. I think it's a lot better than even Exosister. But if people don't like take the time and play it, I don't think it's gonna top any of its tops anytime soon. Because like Twin Saw and all those cards are really powerful.
I saw some people mixing it with the Manadome stuff.
Yeah.
That seems pretty cool. Now let's talk about the deck that got slaughtered on the ban list. I mean, what is Spright going to do with only 2 starter, other than be tier 1?
Yeah. So it's just tier 1.
Like, the deck didn't get hurt at all. But, okay, out of a 12-round event, instead of opening starter for 10 games, you open it for 8 games.
Right. Like there's so many different versions you can play, man. You can play the Melfi version. You can play the Strawberry Spright deck. You can play, I mean, Runick, the Live Twin. There's so many versions, and all of them are good.
Bro, I'm trying to play Adventure Spright with some Apple Dragons in it. That sounds gas.
You can do that too.
Speaking of Apple Dragon and Ding Long, I hate that card, but we got Sword Soul, which I think Sword Soul is really strong, and I think it's probably a lot better now than it was last format.
Yeah, for sure. Somehow people still found a way to do well with Sword Soul. I don't know if I'd put it that high though.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's probably about the same power level as like Sky Striker. They're very similar decks, I think. Not as in how they play, but like they're good if the format isn't like super combo based.
Yeah.
I think.
Cheese out, blackout, pass.
Right. I think somehow people still do well with this deck, and I really do not understand how. I mean, like, yeah, the Tinnies are really strong. They don't get to play very much non-engine, and somehow they still win going second. Like, this deck is good. There's no denying that. It's not one of my favorite decks.
Now, our beloved Kitkalos. We got to put her on there. But Tearlaments. You know, Tearlaments pretty good. They had to worry about a Rise Heart last format. They only got to worry about one of them now. How do you feel about it?
I have a hot take about this deck. I think this deck's tier 1,
Yep,
to be honest.
I agree. I think this deck's gas. As soon as the ban list dropped, I looked at, I think it was Jabin, and I was like, bro, Tier's going to be back. We're going to have people playing Tier all over the place. I think this deck is amazing.
I mean, like, if you look at Tier, it has really good matchups against the Spell Trap decks. Like, It has a kind of a hard Runic matchup because of familiar names, but if you can, like, you can go fast, like, that sounded stupid, but, like, if you could like make a board really quickly, like you could overwhelm them. It's really good against Labyrinth. You can outpower, like your engine outpowers a lot of the decks in the game. Obviously, you're still gonna have to deal with a Rise Heart, but like people were already doing that and they were already topping events.
Yeah.
And like with Kashtira falling out of favor, I think this deck. I know people are gonna be like, "Well, this is cap. Tier's not tier 1," but like it's literally topped every single YCS since it's been hit.
At least one. Yeah. And my take with it against a Rise Heart was before, if you played against Tier and you're playing Cash, you would just double a Rise Heart pass. Now you can't. You know, we can deal with one Rise Heart with Tearlaments. We don't have to deal with two anymore. So like, I think the deck is really strong.
If you out the one a Rise Heart, you're probably not getting a Rise Heart in for the rest of the game.
Yeah, you're winning.
And like if you look in the OCG, man, people still play Tearlaments, and theirs just hit worse than ours is.
Yep. I definitely think this deck is going to see a resurgence. It took a long time for us to get new Tellarknight cards. As soon as they got printed, I played this deck for 2 or 3 weeks. I think the deck is really cool. I don't think it's necessarily good. I'd probably put it at tier 3 or Rogue. But I do think that if it's going to become a meta deck or a top contender deck or anything like that anytime soon, it's probably now when the deck's not so fast. But if you, like, skipping the turn is crazy, and the new rank 4 is really, really good. But
I mean, if you play against decks like Labyrinth, if they go back to like the trap build, and like even Branded, neither one of those decks play hand traps a lot.
Yeah.
So like if you just skip their turn and then kill them, there's most of the time there's nothing they can do.
Yeah, and even if you can't skip the turn against Branded, you just make Diamond. Like,
yep,
they can't activate Branded Fusion. You're negating 1 or 2 cards. Like, I personally would put this deck at a tier 3.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I think this deck
Assault's broken.
Some really cool things. And like I was saying before, like, you want to get to the new XYZ, and all you need is 2 level 4s. So like, people are playing the Spirit Monsters, and I think there's a route you could probably play with Wakashi, to where you could Wakashi to summon the XYZ, and then you could even have scales to where, like, if you get hand trapped at some point, you could pendulum summon more ranks out and probably still skip their turn.
Yeah, like if you draw multiple normal summons, because that deck has that problem. Yeah.
And most of your normal summons have the effect when they're summoned.
I could see it.
Now, Trap Trick, man, people loved this deck when it first came out with that structure deck, but I just don't think this deck is real. I think it has a good trap matchup, but, like, it's a trap deck that's, all their monsters are really weak. I learned that yesterday. I played against it at Locals with Labyrinth, and, you know, most of their stuff's unaffected by trap cards, but they're not affected by 2,900 beat sticks. So
yeah. especially things that can't be targeted. They have a problem with.
Yeah.
It's just a rogue deck, man.
I think the deck's cool, but I don't think it's more than rogue. All right, this is the new deck. Tell me what you think about it.
I think it's Trickstar.
I love to hear that. That's what I like.
I think the deck's tier 3. I think the deck has potential. I think it has some good cards, but like I just think it can get overpowered so easily. It does get to play a lot of the cool non-engine things that like is really good. Like the Cash got to play. Like you get to play like there can only be one, D shifter, any hand trap in the game. You get to play Fenrir. So like the deck's really like super mid rangey, control-y, but it's so situational, man, because you have to have all these attributes in your hand.
Yeah, I haven't tested the deck any, so I'm just gonna take your word for it. I think the deck looks really cool, and it really like the art really reminds me of like a futuristic Zodiac. I think it's really cool. All right, before we finish the list off, Logan, what do you think the most popular deck going into the start of this next format is going to be?
I think the most popular deck is probably either going to be a Spright variant or branded, followed by Cash. I'm not going to be on any of those decks though. I have some spice.
You like
Not. I
Spice?
don't think I'm going to reveal it here though.
Nationals
But
coming up.
yeah, don't be surprised if I'll be milling 15.
That's fair. Yeah, I can definitely see Branded. Branded was already very popular last format. Like, I don't remember how many people were playing at the YCS, but it was like every 10 tables you looked at, there was 2 or 3 Branded players. So now that Branded's getting a push because they're not playing against Lock 5 Triple Rise Heart, I feel like the deck's going to be a lot more popular as well. All right, guys, that comes to an end of our June 5th, 2023 TCG ban list. Sorry, tier list. And I think the meta is going to be really fun. I think there's a lot of decks to be played. And obviously, any of these decks, you can play them, have a good time with. That's what the point of the game is. But this is what we think the start of the format's going to be, especially going into national season. And if you guys have any decks that you think we missed that you want us to talk about, let us know in the description below. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.